Hey everyone, it's Nikki and welcome back to Furry Reviews. Today we're talking about BNA, Brand New Animal, Season 1. BNA was created by Studio Trigger, it was directed by Yo Yoshinari, and written by Kazuki Nakashima. It's a 2D animated series, and it was released in Japan on March 21st, 2020. The story is set in a world where humans and beastmen, Jujin, live side by side. However, beastmen have been oppressed by humans and relegated into the shadows. Beastmen have come together and created a city called Anima City, which is just for beastmen. The story follows Michiru, a teenage girl who was born as a human but miraculously turned into a Tanuki beastman one day, and her journey to Anima City to try and figure out what happened to her. In addition to Michiru, there are a couple other major main characters, such as Shiro, who is a wolf beastman who becomes Michiru's kind of guardian and lead in her new life as a beastman. Nazuna, Michiru's best friend who is mysteriously kidnapped one day. Mayor Barbare, who's a naked mole rat and the mayor of Anima City, who tries to squash out the rampant corruption and crime in the city, and Alan Silvasta, the mysterious head of his pharmaceuticals company. So I've made a list of some of my favorite parts of the series that I want to start off with. The first of which is the name, which I did not notice until after I finished the series. I think it's in part due to how Netflix subtitled the show, because BNA is a pun on DNA, which is a major motif throughout the show, which for whatever reason, every time the characters mention DNA in the show, Netflix decided to subtitle it deoxyribonucleic acid, which is what DNA is, but no one calls it that unless you're in science. So it didn't register in my mind, really, that they were talking about DNA. And then I was like, wait a second. So that's just partially me being stupid and partially the show being clever. It's also Barbare's design. I feel like in a lot of shows that have animal characters, the female animal characters, regardless of what species they are, have to look pretty. And Barbara is a naked mole rat, and the show does not hold back either in her human form or in her beastman form that she is a naked mole rat, which I don't think she's ugly. I think basically every animal's cute, so I'm not one to talk, but I do think that her design is really strong. It doesn't fall into the kind of sexy animal pitfalls that a lot of series go, which we'll get into that when we talk about character design. I also really like the baseball episode. I just really like baseball. I thought it was a funny episode. I liked the kind of homage to the Bad News Bears, and yeah, it was just cute. There's a gang in the series. There's a lot of gangs in the series because Anima City is a crime-ridden town, and there's one gang that's this kind of like female-run mafia. And there is a twist in the motivations behind them, which I probably should have seen coming, but I was kind of surprised by it, and I really liked how the show kind of portrayed them as villains. On the flip side of that, something way not at all serious was when Shiro locks Michiru in the closet to try to hide her from Barbare. It was just so childish, and this man is like thousands of years old, so to think that he could just put her in a closet and not have to deal with her was very funny. Then there's everything to do with Marie, who is a mink who helps Michiru get to Anima City in the first place, and she's kind of this con artist, and I just really like her. I just think she's funny. And I also thought it was funny because I happen to be writing a screenplay with a main character who's a stoat, and there's a running gag in the show that Marie is often mistaken for a weasel, and I was like, that happens in my script. I guess it's not a very unique joke, but I really liked Marie. I liked her design, both in human form and in mink form, and I just thought she was a fun character. I also really liked Nazuna's concert towards the end of the show. I just liked it. I don't know what to say. I thought it was really interesting and a good point for the dramatic moments of the show. There was a lot of stuff happening with just the setting and the kind of backdrop of the concert. Meanwhile, there's all this chaos brewing in the show. And so I just thought that was a really cool kind of set piece for the final act. And lastly, I really liked the night running end credits theme, as well as the evolving nature of the end credits. I just thought it was a really pleasant song, and I really liked the ending credits for the show. All right, now I'm going to start talking about some of the technical elements of the show, which include the storytelling and writing, the character design and art style, the setting and world building, the cinematography and editing, and finally, the sound and music. Storytelling and writing. I think that the story behind this show is really interesting, particularly the mystery surrounding Michiru's transformation. A lot happens in this show. It's very jam-packed. And I think that the showrunners did what they could for the episode count, but I, along with a lot of other people I've noticed, think this show could have benefited from being a full 24 episode season because there are so many world building elements that this story kind of had to cram in at the expense of character arcs as well as the central narrative. For instance, the ending of the series was it was thematically disappointing, shall we say. It just leaves so many loose ends as well, or even plot holes, which if there are subsequent seasons of the show, it'll be interesting to see how the writers kind of try to rectify those plot holes / loose ends. The worst part of the ending was there was a twist, and apparently this also happened in Promare, which I have not yet seen, but it's another Studio Trigger film. This twist just comes out of nowhere. There was no build up to it whatsoever, and it's just like, haha. And it just kind of undermined the whole theme of the show. Just like the whole like beastmen versus humans and like how the humans have oppressed them. But then it's like, psych, it's actually the beastmen who are oppressing themselves. And it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And that was just a total cop-out. So yeah, unfortunately, it just kind of, it starts off really well, and I love the characters, and I think that the central mystery of the show is interesting, but the ending just kind of falls flat. Art style and character design. When I saw the promo for this show, I was a little bit upset when I saw Michiru and her humanoid design compared to the other cast members, particularly Shido, because I thought it was falling into the trap of like Callie from SWAT Cats, or just when the like male characters of a show look like animals, but then the female characters look like humans with little cat noses or whatever. So I was a little like wary of that, but after watching the show, I think that that design choice along with Nazuna's design is actually really smart because of the reveal at towards the end of the show, and it's a good way of giving the audience a heads up that Michiru is not your typical beast man. And all the other female characters, like I was talking about Barbara earlier, but there are a couple other female characters like Melissa, who they have like animal designs. They're not like sexy human animals. So yeah, I really like the character design and the art style. I mean, it's Studio Trigger, it looks beautiful. So yeah, but that was a design choice I was like, but then I watched the show, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I think that they used it in a smart way rather than the typical way. Setting and world building. The setting of Anima City is one of the most interesting things about this story. The anime is focused on its seedy underbelly, which is rife with organized crime. It has all sorts of implications on the possibility of an integrated future between humans and beastmen. Some aspects of the world building kind of puzzled me though, like why do the beastmen default to their human forms? And even in Anima City, like they tried to be like in the show, like, oh, when you turn into your animal form, that's like you like raring for a fight. But it's like, if the animal form is your natural form, that just didn't make sense to me. Shido tells Michiru that's the case, but he doesn't give an explanation as to why. It just, how did that, like, yeah, like, how did the implication that turning into your animal form is like you getting ready for a fight? That just didn't make sense to me. Also, I was kind of wondering what the rest of the world looks like, because this is set in Japan and it talks specifically about how the Japanese government is oppressing the beastmen, both in terms of like, for instance, there are migratory birds that can't travel because of state and national borders. And the show mentions that Shido was like part of this ancient European civilization. So beastmen exist throughout the world. And I was kind of wondering, like, was the oppression of beastmen specific to Japan or was it worldwide? And if so, how did that oppression and subjugation manifest in other countries? And were some other countries more progressive in terms of the integration of beastmen and humans? So I don't know, maybe that'll be a topic for other seasons. Obviously, just focusing on the city in this series was enough in terms of world building. It's just food for thought for a second season, I guess. Cinematography and editing. This series has beautiful cinematography. Like I was talking about with the art style, it's a Trigger show. It's gonna look great. The background art of Anima City is always stunning to look at, regardless of what action is happening on screen. And yeah, it just It looks good. It's well paced in terms of editing. Storytelling, as I mentioned earlier, maybe not quite as much, but I think that the cinematography and editing of the show are really strong. Sound and music. And finally, we get to the last point. This is just a minor thing because it's not like really the main point of the show, but the music for this show is awesome. Like I mentioned earlier, I really like the ending theme. I also like the opening theme as well. I will say that the ending theme is kind of like Nazuna and Michiru's like friendship motif or leitmotif. So it is a bit repetitive within its use in the show, but I don't know, it's a good song. It's a bop. What can I say? So like with Beastars, I wanted to try and compare this series to other media that I've seen, and I found that I couldn't really think of any like other anthropomorphic series that this show reminded me of, but it did remind me of a couple kind of fantasy and sci-fi series, so I wanted to kind of get into that. So the first is Bright, which I know sounds like a diss, but it's the only show it's the only movie I can think of that has humans and like fantasy creatures who are oppressed in like a modern day society. So yeah, that reminded me of Bright, not in terms of plot or anything like that, just that kind of similarity. It also reminded me of District 9, which is a more sci-fi take on that. The difference being with District 9 is that the aliens are from another planet and are newly a part of this Earth, whereas in BNA, the Beastmen have been there forever. And the last comparison to make, which I think is the best comparison to make, just because it's probably the best of these three things, is the Shrek series, of course. You got the humans who are discriminating against the fairy tale creatures, and they are fighting back against the corrupt government, so... BNA is Shrek, but anime. That is my concluding thought on this show. No, but seriously, I thought it was a fun romp with some beautiful animation and a really interesting premise. I wish it had been longer so the writing could have just been more fully fleshed out and less kind of shallow. I just think that they just had way too much material to try to cram into a half season. I think that it should have been a full 24 episode season. Also, the ending was lame. Like, I'm sorry, but no, like it. So I'm curious to see where it'll go in subsequent seasons. I do want subsequent seasons. I want a second season. I want more of this show. Make of that what you will. Thank you for joining me for another review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.